Welcome along to our bumper preview ahead of this weekend's All-Ireland Club Football and Hurling Finals. It is the Club Championship show here on OTB SPORTS, brought to you in association with AIB. Historic weekend, no matter what happens. Kilcoo, Ballygunner potentially winning their first ever All-Ireland titles, while the legacy could go on for Ballyhale Shamrocks, a chance to become the first club to ever run off 3 hurling titles in a row, while Kilmacud Crokes will have the chance to win their third All-Ireland Club Football title. We're starting our preview with the football finals. I'd say I've got Michael Verney alongside me, and we're also joined by Kilcoo forward Paul Devlin. Paul, what's the feeling like now, getting ready for another big occasion for the club, having been in the All-Ireland final back in 2020 against Corofin? Does it feel a bit different not getting ready for your first ever final, or what are the excitement levels like a couple of days out now?
To be honest, it seems to be a lot more feet firmly on the ground. It's another game, and we're just preparing as best we can for it. I know there's a big hype around the club at the minute, but the players themselves just take it as another task, and it's all about producing a performance on Saturday.
We were chatting to Aidan Brannigan ahead of the game against St Finbarrs in the semi-final, and he was saying that maybe the experience of that run in 2019, winning an Ulster title, having been to Croke Park and played against Corofin, is actually helpful this time around, that a lot of the nervous energy that might have been there on the maiden run through the province, this is a fairly seasoned experience for you now over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. We've been on the road a long time, and listen, sometimes you have to fail to be successful, and listen, we've had a fair share of defeats, and there'll be some nice wins as well, but it's definitely the group of players that we have here at the minute. We've learned a lot from each other as well in some of the tight games we've had over the years. So all in all, I think it's actually stood to us in this year's campaign, and there's a lot of boys stepping up to the plate.
Well, potentially you could have had the opportunity to kick the winning score at the end of normal time against St Finbarrs in Portlaoise a couple of weeks ago. Then the aforementioned Aidan Brannigan got sent off, and subsequently that red card has been rescinded, so he is available for this weekend. But I'm sure you're just getting ready for that free routine to pop it over and potentially send your team to Croke Park. You wouldn't have wanted that extra 20 minutes afterwards.
Look, at the same time, listen, it's just, like, you never know what happens in a game of football. You have to prepare yourself for anything, and obviously we didn't prepare for what happened. But listen, we regrouped after. We're all the team. We win together, we lose together. So the extra time, it did give us a wee bit of incentive to try and kick on. And I thought we produced better football in the extra time, and hopefully that will stand to us coming into this weekend.
Yeah, you were clinical in extra time by comparison to the first 60 minutes of the match. I would think you were very pleased with the way that you played over that extra 20 minutes.
Oh, without a doubt. Obviously, the first 60 minutes, there's a lot of errors made, and we kind of knew we just couldn't get into our rhythm. But obviously, whenever extra time came, we kind of learned from a couple of years ago in the All-Ireland final. Corofin taught us a lesson in extra time, and we kind of said to ourselves we need to learn from it. And in extra time against St Finbarrs, we did play a lot better, and we were very assured on the ball.
How much of a driving factor is it, knowing that it's so recent in the memory that you went to Croke Park and you had to watch Corofin walk up the steps and lift their third in a row, that you were so close to them in normal time to winning that game? How much of a motivation is that coming into this weekend?
It is a bit of motivation. It more shows where we are. If you understand what I'm saying, like a couple of years ago, like Corofin, like the best club team, this is like the 1-3 in a row, and no other club's done it. And for us to come very that close to them, it kind of shows the type of team that we are and what we can do. So it just gives that confidence to yourself as a team to produce the goods. And listen, all it takes is the best performance we can on Saturday, and see where it takes us.
Paul, just a quick one on Mickey Moran, the quiet man of Gaelic football, I would say. I don't know if he's ever spoken in media circles. I haven't never seen him quoted anyway. But can you just talk to me about what he's brought to the table? I think he's got the 5 last Ulster titles under his belt between yourselves and Schlockneil. Like, the quiet man to the media, but I'm sure he's not too quiet behind the scenes with G.
Okay, he gets his point across the board, and like, because he's such that quiet incentive that anything he does say, you kind of take it on board, because he doesn't speak that too often. And like he brings about that calmness that you see him along the line. And like, you know, as a player, if you're looking along the line and seeing him maybe be on edge, you kind of be on edge yourself. But whenever you see him so calm along the line, it kind of settles through the whole team. And listen, we know what Mickey wants us to do in all the terms of football, so we we just provide as best we can on the field for him.
If you're to pinpoint what exactly he does, what are his biggest strengths, would you say, Paul?
Probably belief in ourselves and just be ourselves on the field, and obviously carry into the game what you do in training. So the games are obviously won today, but like we feel that the games are won maybe the two weeks of training beforehand, the in-house games, the unseen hours of practicing in certain aspects.
When it comes to the style of the two teams, you're broken a set up, defensively to counter-attack, to be difficult to break down and then to use the space when it comes up the other end. Both teams are very good at pressuring the ball as well. Like I think back to even the turnover that you got for the goal against Glen in the Ulster semi-final. It's going to be an intriguing contest of two teams trying to actually stop the other from coming out with the ball this weekend.
Okay, it's going to be the team who can adapt most, and it's going to be the team who makes the least mistakes that will probably come through in the end of it. Like the Glen game was, we were very defensively solid, and obviously against Finbars there's a lot of errors made. But listen, two teams going to the final, there's nobody who wants to lose the game. We just have to set out our stall as best we can, and hopefully we'll come out with the right end result. And
you've had to unlock different types of defences during the year, even thinking back to the Ulster final where Derek Onley Harps were more than happy to sit players back and try and make it awkward to actually create space. This Kilmacud team have been very impressive defensively though. Second half they shut down Port Arlington in the Leinster semi-final, and Naas struggled to get going after half time in the final, and they kept Pearce's to single digit scores last time out as well. As a forward, you've got a nice little challenge coming up trying to unlock that Kilmacud defence this weekend.
Okay, yes, every forward likes a challenge, and to be able to adapt to play against different types of defences and how to break down. They're a very experienced side. They've obviously a few All-Ireland winners on their panel, and I'm sure the advice they're giving the younger boys of the panel going into this game, they're probably taking on board. We just have to worry about our own game and focus on how we can break them down and get scores.
Paul, you mentioned at the start there about maybe keeping a lid on the outside noise and all the hullabaloo around Kilcoo, but what is it like up there at the moment? You saw the influx of kids running onto the pitch at the end of the semi-final. I presume the place is gone a bit bonkers. You do maybe have to check yourself just so that you don't lose the run of yourselves in the run up to the game as well, but it must be a hugely exciting time too around the place.
Oh yeah, the place is buzzing. Every night you're down in training, you have all these young ones landing, and they're actually playing on the top field in a wee bit of darkness, kicking about with football. So that way incentive, obviously, if your senior team's being successful, the kind of young ones want to be there and be involved in it. So it's nice to see the young lads even coming down and training and watching you and inspiring them to be coming up to the ranks as well.
Like, not to be too sentimental, but if you bring the American Cup back for the very first time, that's the ultimate inspiration that you can provide for those young players we saw running on after the late score in extra time. Like, if you are going to inspire the next generation, you probably want to cash in on this very strong side that you have in Kilcoo at the moment.
Okay, yes, every team has their period of dominance, and thankfully I'm involved with a team now that has that wee bit of dominance. It's just like you said, like you just have to make the most of it while you're here, and like this Saturday is all that we're focusing on and putting in our best performance we can, because you don't want to be leaving any regrets on the field.
Can you tell us a bit about where the belief comes from as well? Because when we were chatting to Aidan Brannigan a few weeks ago, he was talking actually about a talk that Tony McEntee had given in the club about 15 years ago when he was handing out some underage medals, and he was saying that there was no reason that Kilcoo couldn't become a force within not just Down but within the Ulster Championship itself. It took a little bit of time to maybe get to that level, to be consistently succeeding and winning titles, but where's the belief come from in the last few years to go to that next level and to be the breakthrough team to get to an All-Ireland final twice now?
It probably comes as a hurt of maybe losing. Like, we lost the 2012 Ulster final to then 2016, and then we lost our Down Championship final in 2018. So that probably, they did hurt a lot, and people maybe question the team itself and maybe question certain players and that there. But we just focus on ourselves, and we know ourselves at the belief that's in the squad. And there's boys breaking through each year, and some maybe haven't been heard of before. So it's good to the competition, and the players want to prove themselves at the highest level, and it's where you want to be. You want to be playing football at the highest level and testing yourself against the best.
Might just ask you on a final note then, going back to Croke Park, you scored 5 points against Corofin last time, you kicked 3 frees. that would have been the last time as a group of Kilcoo that you would have played at Croke. Kilmacud could have had a couple of occasions playing there in Leinster this year. How much of an advantage do you think it will be as a team to at least have that experience of Croke Park 2 years ago before going into this Saturday?
Oh, it's massive. Like Croke Park, it's a great stadium to play in. It's where you want to be playing football at the end of the day. But sometimes you can't get caught up in the hype about it and the occasion rather than focusing on the game itself. So personally, from 2 years ago, I felt that maybe we got caught a wee bit in the hype and maybe expectations were way too high than what we should have looked at. But obviously it's a learning curve now this time around that we firmly just our feet on the ground and focus on ourselves and what the job is in hand and just put in as best performance we can as a team.
Well, look, it should be a great final on Saturday afternoon. Paul, the very best of luck getting ready for it.
Oh, cheers. Thanks very much, guys.
Michael, I'm really looking forward to this final. On the face of it, we're looking at the two teams that many people would have picked out early in the year once we got down to the provincial series that they were probably going to go to the final. We talked in this show a good few times about the fact that Kilcoo seemed to find the key to no matter what kind of defence goes up in front of them. But I've been massively impressed by Kilmacud Crokes' defensive effort in the last few games. And that goes from the front right through to the back. It's not just a case of having 6 good backs. We were talking to Shane Horn last week, and he said that they are told by their management to push up, to try and get turnovers, to try and force the agenda when teams are coming out. And they're probably going to have to do that against Kilcoo this weekend, who love to run the ball from deep.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game, really, isn't it? As you said there, it is probably two counter-attacking teams, and like two of the best counter-attacking teams we've seen in a long, long time. It's kind of going to be one of those games. It's not going to be particularly high scoring, I'd imagine, but it will be a fascinating kind of arm wrestle. And like, wouldn't it be some achievement? Like, you couldn't have said that Kilmacud Crokes would win All Ireland without Paul Mannion. You just wouldn't have said that, especially after the Dublin campaign. And you know, that's looking more and more likely as the weeks go on. And they've almost solidified in his absence. They were able to get over, obviously, the Leinster final in his absence, and now they're 60 minutes away from winning the Andy Merrigan for the third time. So I do have an inkling that might just come to catch them at this stage. Kilcoo seem to have learned an awful lot from that All-Ireland final defeat, and just not so much a no-show in extra time, but just they were ground down by Corofin in extra time. They probably missed their chance in normal time. And I think it's just Kilcoo edging it for me, but a fascinating game in store.
Yeah, like missing Mannion, it steals the ace in the pack, really. I think back to that Port Arlington game where Kilmacud had to adjust a little bit at half time. Now, tactically, they got it spot on in the second half and they pushed up really well on the kick out. But also, as space started to open up, Paul Mannion was able to, open up his legs in Croke Park, get moving, and he was totally to the centre of all the good stuff they did in the second half. Okay, everyone else has had to up it maybe by a few percent in the forward line since then for Kilmacud, but he's a massive loss not to have a marquee all-star player like that available in the circumstances where this game could be very tight.
The thing about having a marquee player like that is that he mightn't be able to light it up for 3/4 of the game, but the fact that extra attention is needed on him, it creates openings for other players, and then when maybe the play loosens up and he's able to get a run on his marker, he could kick a couple of points when it really matters. But I think it's really the knock-on effect of him not being there. There's probably not as much attention on the Kilmacud forwards maybe, and it might allow Kilcoo to express themselves even more. But like, from a Kilmacud point of view and from Robbie Brennan's point of view, he couldn't be any happier with how they've reacted to been missing one of the best players in the country. And they will fancy their chances of getting over the line even in his absence. Yeah,
a lot of players that Kilmacud are going to have to stop, like Laverty and like Paul, we were just talking to a few minutes ago. It's a very, very strong Kilcoo team that they go up against who, when they've had to open up and get scores like they did in the Ulster final, even when they were up against a team who were, effectively playing a blanket defence in front of them, they found answers within that game as well. But on the Kilmacud side, when it comes defensively, how good has Rory O'Carroll been this year, Mick?
Yeah, he's been brilliant. It's his positioning well. It's just... it's funny when you get that bit older, you realise you can't get to areas of the pitch that you'd love to get to, but your head tells you where you need to be. Your head tells you where the ball is going to break, and it's just that bit of experience. He's almost like the quarterback there, really dictating and controlling affairs there. He's been huge. He's stood up, and Craig Diaz has probably stood up even in Mannion's absence even more as well. And those guys are going to have huge games at the weekend, but they're coming in serious form. And even like Shane Horn starting sometimes, not starting the other times. Like, how many other club teams could afford to have a player like that even coming in off the bench? So they've got serious reserves, and if they are to get over the line, they're going to need the likes of Rory O'Carroll, Craig Diaz and these guys to really, really stand up. But they've stood up to this point, so I'm sure they'll fancy it from here on in.
I wonder as well, just on that point, because there's a few Kilcoo players who dropped off the down panel and have been focused on Kilcoo over the last 3 years. And similarly, Kilmacud Crokes players like O'Carroll and like Craig Diaz and like Keane O'Connor, who were involved with Dublin previously but are now 100% committed to their club. I wonder, you can maybe tell me about the experience of this when you actually finish up at Intercounty and you're 100% committed to the club. How much more it gives to the club to have these guys available all the time, as opposed to maybe parachuting in after Dublin's championship run ends?
Well, you'd often hear of, the county lads came in and they give training a big boost. And that could be in August, normally, we'd say, after an All-Ireland campaign. But if the county lads or ex-county lads are there from January onwards, imagine the boost that gives to training the whole way through. And all of a sudden, standards are raised. The nature of county players is that they will demand more. That's just they have to demand more themselves to play inter-county level, so they're going to demand more of who they play with at club level. So training standards will increase, expectations will increase from an earlier stage of the year. Standards are raised, and then those standards are carried through the whole way. Plus, it's an integration thing as well. It can be hard to reintegrate players back coming from a county fold back into the club fold, whereas if they're integrated from the start of the year, like they've played, could have played 10 to 15 league and practice games where those guys have been playing. They know exactly the structure of their team. They're not... They weren't calling anybody back in, or they weren't making a game plan, and it was been done without 3 of their key players coming back in from county. So I think it's a big thing, especially when you're with a club like Kilmacud as well. It's not exactly far off county standards. If it's probably very close to Division 4 and Division 3 standards anyway. And having those county players in the fold full time can only be raising the bar even higher.
And when it comes to Kilmacud as well, they've been able to overcome those adverse situations during the year. Like, I think back to proper arm wrestle in a Dublin final a few months ago. We think about the Port Arlington game. Even, at times when Pádraig Pearses were coming back to it in the second half, Kilmacud were able to find answers. Even when it got back to 1 point, I think in the 3 different occasions that Pádraig Pearses got back within a point in the semi-final, Kilmacud would go up the other end and get the next score in the game. This is a team that are a pretty tough nut to crack, really.
Yeah, and Will, the most impressive part is, they were abysmal for half an hour of the Dublin final. They were under pressure for long stages against Naas. They were under pressure for stages against Pearses, but they're able to grind it out. They're able to find a way, even when they're not playing well. So from Robbie Brennan's point of view, I'm sure he's thinking, if these lads can click for 60 minutes, we will not be beaten. We've produced 20 minutes, we've produced a quarter, we've maybe produced a half of really good stuff. If they can pull it all together, on the biggest occasion on Saturday, they will really, really fancy their chances, no doubt about it.